It is a great pleasure that I can introduce Sue Wali for our presentation this Sunday afternoon at the Rising Tide Foundation. And Sue's presentation is called From Cybernetics to the Counterculture and the New Age Movement to the Oracle of AI. Wow, that promises quite a journey. And what Sue had written in the introduction, and I just will read the last paragraph, not the whole thing, but the last paragraph, okay? So Sue says, there is a direct trajectory from the cybernetics project of Norbert Wiener through the movements of the 60s and 70s right up to our present day of transhumanism, AI algorithms, and computer technocrats who are busily envisioning a world of their own making. So, and we're giving to you, okay, we're having some technical difficulties in terms of sharing her PowerPoint. So I think Sue will just have to kind of do it on the way she wants to do it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Magdalena. Yes, I worked very hard to integrate a lot of pictures and film footage, but we'll just wing it. And I just want to say what an honor and a pleasure it is to be here. My husband and I, Dave, were trying to understand the deeper currents that were directing the society as a whole. And when we found RTF, it really helped us to connect the dots and understand the deeper currents. So as Magdalena shared, my PowerPoint is called From Cybernetics to Counterculture and New Age into the Oracle of AI. And how I came to this presentation was I was watching Jordan Peterson, and it was really his jacket that captured me. And on his jacket, on one cuff, was an image of skull and bones. And then on the other cuff was a Templar cross. And then up on his shoulders was a woman's head with on a wooden platter. And then there was the letters TDT. And when I Googled that, the first thing that came up was Tucker Davis Technologies, which is the world's most advanced systems for neurophysiology research, behavior for the next generation. So it's a computerized neurophysiology systems that are being sold. And it's a behavioral neuroscience system that integrates modules to control behavioral boxes with state-of-the-art Python-based behavioral control software. And the program system is based on studying Pavlovian operant fear conditioning, self-administration, and startle responses. And they also show human heads for the electrophysiology and optical neuroscience, and a mouse for the behavioral neuroscience. So when I was at university, I was doing an NSERC grant to study memory research. And my professor had shared with me that he was a Skinnerian, which I'll get to, but Skinnerian behaviorism, and that horrified me. And I knew I needed to get out of academia. But so the question was, I was haunted by Jordan's jacket, and I felt like, are they conveying some kind of a story? And there's also X's going down one sleeve and a DNA chromosome going down the other. And I just wondered, is there a connection between behaviorism? And he said something that reminded me of systems thinking and the New Age, because it was called spirituality and the mind. And I wrote that to Matt, and he said, check it out. So I did. And I did find not just a direct link between the images of man that the behaviorists and the cyberneticists hold, that is so misanthropic and diabolical, but they also were key players in creating the psychological operation and mass manipulation of the public right through the 50s into the New Age. And then there was a direct line to what we see today in transhumanism and AI and algorithms and so forth. So, so we'll begin with behavioral psychology and Skinner's box. B.F. Skinner was a behavioral psychologist and was ranked by the American Psychological Association as the 20th century's most eminent psychologist. And in Changing Images of Man, which is a blueprint for how to restructure Western civilization by changing people's image of what it means to be human. Will Harman, the co-author of that, he wrote of Skinner, the branch of this behaviorism school of thought, which was proved most successful, emphasizes the technique of operant conditioning, a term originated by B.F. Skinner to denote a systematic procedure whereby the actions of an organism are brought under control by giving it a reward if and only if it behaves in a specified manner. This technique has been successfully used in education, psychotherapy, and in prisons to alter the whole behavior patterns of individuals. So it has been introduced or implemented in education widely. So Skinner is credited with transforming psychology into a scientific discipline based upon experimental methods. Mind or internal mental processes like thoughts and feelings are just hypothetical constructs not amenable to empirical investigation. And he claimed that all behavior, including human behavior, is a result of conditioning. And therefore, psychology should focus on observable behavior and its relationship to environmental stimuli. So he created the Skinner box, which has an electrified grid for the floor. And then there were loudspeakers and lights that they could blast the animal with. If the animal, a mouse or a pigeon, would press the lever, they'd get a food pellet. But if they did something the researcher or the scientist didn't want, then they would get electroshocked, which is very much in line with Jeremy Bentham's principle of pleasure versus pain. Oh dear. Let me just. I just lost something here. Sorry about that. I just lost my slideshow. I'm going to have to. Okay. See if this works. Okay. So there we go. So C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Abolition of Man, was so he saw what was happening, and he wrote the Abolition of Man to stand up for the concept of human dignity and freedom. And in Abolition of Man, Lewis rails against the dehumanized conditioners who control without any recognition or obedience to universal principles of truth, virtue, and morality, which lay as the foundation of the sovereign individual and the sovereign nation state. For Lewis, what makes us truly human is an obedience to our conscience through which we may live in alignment with natural law and universal principles. In that hideous strength, Lewis sought to reveal that scientific fascism and human experimentation taking place at Tavistock was driven by a desire for total control and social engineering disguised as scientific progress. And he warned that if we do not uphold universal principles, then the techno overlords would become the authorities through which all morals and choices will be framed. And Skinner responded directly to Abolition of Man, citing Lewis and affirming that his goal is indeed to abolish autonomous man. In Beyond Freedom and Dignity, a book written by Skinner in 1971, he argues that only if such mechanistic and pre-scientific concepts as will, freedom, consciousness are cast off, Does man have a chance to attain a truly peaceful, rational, and humane society in the future? So Skinner promotes the technology of behavior to manipulate the human environment so that behavior is controlled systematically and to desired ends, what he calls cultural engineering. And the Rockefellers, which the Rockefeller machine plays, goes right through this whole story. Arranged for Skinner's placement at Harvard, and Skinner was one of the unnamed authors of The Changing Images of Man. So, and then we come to, that was in the 30s, same time as the Technate program was going on in Canada under Joshua Haldeman. Then we come to cybernetics in the 40s, a new field under the direction of eugenicist and high-level operative Bertrand Russell, a British aristocrat and philosopher who advocated for a technocratic society, and his protege, Norbert Wiener, who saw mind as mental processes that were effectively equivalent to computers and complex information processing systems that can be reprogrammed and given goals and a purpose, including humans. Through the control of the inputs via feedback loops, one can steer the input and thus direct the behavior of the complex systems. And Wiener coined the term black box for any complex device for which the inputs and outputs are known. But knowing the inner workings, just like the inner workings, the information processing in a computer, are completely irrelevant. So the definition of cybernetics means helmsman, which refers to a central command center from which all operations are controlled. And as Skinner outlined in Beyond Freedom and Dignity, the cyberneticists also saw themselves as the godly social engineers of society and felt it was their duty to govern over a one world governance system that they would direct from on high. So then the Macy Conferences were held with the financial backing of the Rockefeller Foundation and the Macy Foundation. Wiener organized the Macy Conferences beginning in 1946 with the primary focus on cybernetics and a new understanding of mind based on machine learning. A core group of 20 Tavistokian aligned British thinkers came together with, and this is from Matt, the unwavering faith that a human mind was a mixture of bestial impulses guided by closed system machine logic and nothing more. In a computer, the whole is but the sum of parts, and it must be as such in all information systems, including human brains, ecosystems, and the universe as a whole. Metaphysical principles like soul, purpose, God, justice, and free will had no place in the minds of these human calculators. And this group developed socio-cybernetics to study human order, to reverse engineer and manipulate them. They carried out the diabolic mission to create the ultimate engineered society project, which is accelerating today under the implementation of AI-driven technocratic control systems, where there's even a call to replace all human decision-making. So, this is acting up. Okay. So the Macy Conferences were held in Macy Conferences and MK Ultra. The Macy Conferences were held the first psychedelic conferences on LSD in 1959. This was connected to the infamous CIA's MK Ultra program that ran from 1953 and operated through the 60s, and the use of barbaric mind control techniques to depattern individuals. One of the focuses was on using LSD to fracture the mind and silo parts of a person's awareness that could lead to multiple personalities or a useful schizoid state to create a kind of Manchurian candidate. The Macy Foundation was also deeply involved in the funneling of hundreds of thousands of doses of LSD supplied by the CIA via a Swiss pharmaceutical company, Sandoz, which we'll come to psychiatric hospitals for the MK Ultra program. And what is largely hidden is that MK Ultra and the engineering of the counterculture was actually a British-led operation. The British oligarchy was clearly threatened by Americans' optimism in the future. It had been shaken, but it was still there based upon scientific discoveries and profound advances in human productivity. The convergence of the cybernetics engineers alongside the oligarchical pro-drug elements of the British intelligence that had known how to dismantle a society through its opium wars on China came together, and the Tavistock psychiatric establishment, and united in a drive to degrade and demoralize the American population through a psychological warfare operation of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So one of the main scientists, cyberneticists involved was Gregory Bateson. And Bateson was an anthropologist, ex-husband of Margaret Mead, famous anthropologist. He studied schizophrenia, genetics, ecology, dolphin intelligence, and his father, William Bateson, founded and named the field of genetics and referred to himself as Mendel's bulldog. So there was lots of overlap with the Batesons and the Huxleys. William Bateson also considered himself a key promoter of Darwinian evolution from a different trajectory. So the family was part of British intelligentsia, and women were involved in the suffragist movement, which were connected to the Theosophical Society. Like the Huxleys, who had a brother who died. Both of Gregory Bateson's brothers died, one in the World War I and the other one by shooting himself under the statue of Eros in Piccadilly Square. He was sent to private school in England, where he often stated that he felt very suicidal. And he was very close friends with Aldous and Julian Huxley. He served in the OSS during World War II, designing black propaganda radio broadcasts. He had developed a theory of schismogenesis, which is a creation of division, social division. And so through propaganda and misinformation, he was able to create so much chaos and confusion that it divided the enemy forces. And I have a picture here. So he has a famous quote, well, if you're in that he stated, "I think that cybernetics is the biggest bite out of the fruit of the tree of knowledge that mankind has taken in the last 2,000 years." And he grew up, I mean, that very ominous statement, but he in the sitting room of the Bateson family home was the original painting, watercolor painting of Satan exulting over Eve. And it's literally Satan flying over Eve with her body wrapped by a snake. So considering that quote, it's very, very ominous. He was involved in both sides of the cybernetics and MKUltra program. And he developed second order cybernetics, which is kind of a theory of mind that brought the engineer inside of the feedback loops and considered human beings, society, and nature as one mind. And he even called that mind God. So now God is reduced to a cybernetics framework. He also had a theory around LSD, schizophrenia, and Zen koans. So to break the human mind, either through that creates a dissolution of the boundaries of the self and you merge into one. You could get there through any of those avenues, LSD, schizophrenia, or Zen koan. So the Macy scientists were all experimenting with LSD and mescaline and giving it to each other, and Aldous Huxley was a part of that. And when Gregory Bateson had LSD and he became one with the music, he said, "This is the true state of being, and we need to construct a brand new epistemological framework around that." He became MKUltra's agent at Palo Alto Veterans Facility, where he administered LSD to dozens of people, including Allen Ginsberg and Ken Kesey, who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, both of whom would go on to play key roles in the indoctrination and mass drugging of the American youth. And now Stuart Brand comes into play. He too was, we'll see him at every cultural pivot through this period. Just for a little background, he went to Stanford University, and his favorite professor was Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb, who stated that the world was overpopulated and we needed to eliminate billions of people. Then after, he was quite an outcast, and he joined the army, and then he was mysteriously discharged in 1960-62. The first thing he did was go to an LSD experimentation operation that was going on. And John Burchak, who wrote the book, The Many Lives of Stuart Brand, stated that he was given 2 doses of LSD plus an injection of LSD. And in a talk, John Burchak said, he was trying to get to the bottom of it, but they would use an additional injection for the people where it was really hard to break down their barriers. And then he went on to say that it's very curious how Brand was at every single, or not every single, but he was so pivotal in all of the cultural moments that happened over the 60s and 70s. So after that, Stuart Brand joined Ken Kesey, who was handled by Gregory Bateson, and who created a band of LSD initiates called the Merry Pranksters. And they went on a psychedelic school bus ride across America that you may be familiar with, giving out LSD doses to anyone who was receptive, but they also often spiked LSD with people unknowingly. And this was during, the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the assassination of JFK, and the horrors of the Vietnam War, and there were rallies and protests across the country. The angst that so many young people felt was then redirected into a culture of drugs, sex, and rock and roll, of diversion that had been carefully planned out. In 1966, Bates and Kesey organized the Last Trips Festival, where 10,000 people drank acid-laced punch and watched the Grateful Dead perform under psychedelic lights to explore the boundaries of consciousness, but often just tried to survive the harrowing night. I didn't fully appreciate the horrors of what had been inflicted upon the American youth until I read Daniel Estulin's book on Tavistock, The Engineering of the Mass Mind, where he wrote, at Woodstock, nearly 500,000 youth gathered to be drugged and brainwashed on a farm. The victims were isolated, immersed in filth, pumped with psychedelic drugs, and all with the full complicity of the FBI and government officials. And in an article, it's a LaRouche article called Psychedelics, Climate Change, and How the British Wage War, Robert Ingraham writes, this was all-out cultural war. The question for the British was, can the spirit of the population be broken? Can people be won over to support or at least tolerate the complete abandonment of the human commitment to scientific progress? Can they be induced to forsake self-identity located in invention, discovery, and creative identity? How do you turn a population mad? How do you turn it against its own deeply ingrained cultural values? And I was watching a program with Peter Thiel where he was reflecting on the limited progress we have seen since 1969 and asked why this stagnation has happened. And he stated, if we think of the Apollo space program as the last great technological scientific project, there's some sense wherein July 1969, we landed on the moon, and Woodstock started 3 weeks later. With the benefit of hindsight, somehow that's when scientific and technological progress stopped, and the hippies took over the country. In some ways, you can describe it as a shift from outer space, exploring the world outside of us, to inner space, yoga, meditation, psychological drugs, the navel gazing of identity. When people say, why did it happen? You always have these questions. Why? Why did it happen? And my cop-out answer is always that why questions are overdetermined. So no knowing. And with all of the data in the world, we just can't figure it out. So for Woodstock, which happened in August 15th to August 18th, 1969, they flew in Swami Satchidananda to open the ceremonies. And I was going to just show a quick video of that. But it was a crystallization of the counterculture. And they were also starting the guru craze. And so they were planting the seeds for the next phase into the new age. And I'll just read a short clip from the film about Swami Satchidananda, whose opening invocation at Woodstock, witnessed by nearly 500,000 youngsters and seen in part in the Oscar-winning documentary about the mud and acid-soaked weekend, accelerated public awareness of India's heritage of our inner exploration. Well, some of the values that Woodstock was said to embody may have faded after the festival. The embrace of yoga and Eastern spirituality has grown stronger, changing the way we understand and practice religion, the way we take care of our minds and bodies, and the way we contemplate our place in the cosmos. So back to Stuart Brand, after he did the LSD acid-soaked trip across America, he started a new campaign called "Why Haven't We Seen a Photograph of the Whole Earth Yet?" And that entailed making buttons with that question, making flyers, wearing sandwich boards, and writing letters to NASA. And lo and behold, he was able to publish the very first picture of the whole Earth ever seen on the front cover of the Whole Earth catalog, which he started. I should say that, I can't remember what I was going to say, but I have pictures here from the Whole Earth catalog where they're actually showing alien spaceships and pictures of mechanical man in alignment with human man, and but that's juxtaposed against hippies and the Whole Earth Store, which was a division of Portola Institute, which I find interesting because we're seeing the portal being used in many different ways today. So it was in 1968 that Brand launched the Whole Earth Catalog, which became a Bible to hippies and techno geeks like Steve Jobs. Whole Earth was best known for offering tools and tips for back to the landers and those seeking alternative lifestyle. And the catalog also launched the information revolution and spawned a new cyber culture. So they brought together hippies and cyber culture. Drawing from the work of Norbert Wiener, Gregory Bateson, and Buckminster Fuller, a primary focus of WEC was understanding whole systems. Brand's opening quote from the first issue of the Whole Earth Catalog was, "We are as gods and might as well get good at it." And it called for a new vision of the future, one where the challenges of overpopulation and a human-caused environmental crisis and the power of cybernetics to solve these problems at a planetary scale, united in a technologically interconnected and synchronized whole, a cybernetic world organism. The symbolic representation of this cybernetic world organism was given by Buckminster Fuller as Spaceship Earth. And so we'll look at Bucky's geodesic dome, how that shaped the people's perception of the world. After the publication of the photo of the Earth from space, the image of Spaceship Earth as a single finite and fragile planet, highlighting the imperative that all must cooperate to ensure its survival, was so powerful in its effect that a new planetary framework was inserted into the cultural milieu. With this came an ecological ethics, based upon saving the earth that would prioritize the moral relationship between humans and nature above all. If the spaceship Earth is a closed system, then the intrinsic value of ecosystems and advocating for their preservation became the highest moral good, with individual dignity and freedom a distant second. And this mandate to protect the environment provides the moral justification for planetary governance. And this moves into global brain and the collective intelligence. So there was every 5 to 10 years they would come out with a new book called on the global brain, starting with Peter Russell, and then Harold Bloom wrote the global brain, the evolution of mass mind. Erwin Law in around 2000, and then Erwin Laszlo wrote Quantum Shift and the Global Brain, I think around 2007. So the global brain suggests that the interconnected network of people and technologies, particularly the World Wide Web, is evolving into a collective intelligence resembling a global brain, bringing back H.G. Wells' World Brain and Chardin's Noosphere. And I just have pictures here, but the visions of the current technocrats from seasteading show geodesic domes. Seasteading is like setting up cities in international waters so that they're outside of the jurisdiction of any nation state. Balaji Srinivasan, the network state, he has the same. He has a geodesic dome with it looks like little geodesic dome homes around it. Digital twin cities looks like a global brain of digital domes. Cybersecurity dome, reminiscent of Palantir's cybersecurity, and the global AI blockchain again, showing a kind of global intelligence around it. So at this period, psychedelics merged with cybernetics to create technomysticism. And for many, many of the technocrats, they are immersed in science fiction. Many of them are immersed in the occult. So in the late 60s, cyber utopians were flying high on the notion that advanced informational processing machines and visions of the World Wide Web would bring about a perfected social order. The mystical side of cyber utopianism, and remember, these guys were all doing LSD and mescaline and melded psychedelic visions of transpersonal harmony with cybernetic visions of a world linked by invisible currents of energy and information. Cybernetics looks like the living books, like The Living Brain, are filled with thoughts about dreams, visions, ESP, nirvana, magical powers of Eastern yogis. Other first-generation cyberneticists wrote of being spiritualists, time worshippers, or absorbed by mystical number systems, including gematria and geometries. And today, Nick Land, founder of the accelerationist movement, also fueled by psychedelics and techno, foresees a machinic singularity where humanity is reshaped or eclipsed by technology. His concept of hyperstition, which is fictional ideas that catalyze reality, envisioned techno-capital as an alien intelligence, prefiguring transhuman hyper-racist entities and technoplastic beings. And that was from Courtney Turner's article on the Phoenix conspiracy. And I think Courtney's online, so her articles are absolutely fundamental for reading right now. So with that, we're switching now to the creation of what I call cybernetic New Age religion. Cybernetics is kept in the background, but it's integrated into all of their thinking. So we're going to go to the Lindisfarne Association, where the Rockefellers meet Teilhard de Chardin. So the Lindisfarne Association was founded by William Irwin Thompson, who was a cultural historian. And it was a think tank created in 1972 aimed at bringing about a scientific and cultural transformation. So Lindisfarne was developed to devoted to the study and enactment of a new planetary culture based upon Teilhard de Chardin's vision, where humanity's collective consciousness, fueled by increasing interconnectedness and technological advancements, would form a thinking layer enveloping the world, a planetary network of consciousness and thought. And as I was doing the research, I listened to a talk by William Irwin Thompson, and he mentioned going up to see Lawrence Rockefeller in his penthouse with Gregory Bateson and Baker Roshi, who had been a Zen master for the San Francisco Zen studio and Zen Center until he was kicked out for his relation affairs and extravagant lifestyle. But nevertheless, as they're coming down the elevator, they're joking that, oh, Lawrence Rockefeller didn't really get what we were talking about, but he's going to give us millions and millions of dollars, so all is well. So Rockefellers kept coming up, and then I thought, I think it was on Courtney's podcast that I saw Jacob Nordengard describe his book, Rockefeller Controlling the Game. So I thought, well, I better get that book. So, and I didn't get very far into it when he wrote, a major inspiration for the Rockefeller family was the French Jesuit priest Teilhard's vision of the future, which was closely connected to the development of cybernetic technology. The first step toward the development of the noosphere is represented by the internet and will, according to the vision, be followed by the development of a technologically improved superhuman with a united global consciousness and unified nations under a world government, or the Omega point. And Teilhard de Chardin and Julian Huxley were good friends, and they were always talking about transhumanism, superhumanism, and it was Julian Huxley who founded the term. Usually it's said in 1957, but I found references that the essay within the book, New Wine for a New Body, was actually published in 1951, which is all around the time of the Macy Conferences. All of this has been planned out for a long time. So this vision was something the Rockefeller family wanted to help turn into reality. And the Rockefeller family is just a high level. They're not the top oligarch, but they are put in charge of making sure everything is monetarily funded. And so they funded the Lindisfarne Association, where discussions were held on how to make Teilhard de Chardin's vision of a planetary culture and ethics, meaning globalization and planetary governance, a reality. This had a major impact on the emerging New Age movement. And the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, there's 5 brothers. So Lawrence Rockefeller has been in charge of funding all of the drug culture, the counterculture movement, the New Age. And so Lindisfarne was but one think tank that was part of a much larger plan to bring about the Great Reset. First, the culture would need to be reshaped, demoralized, destabilized, and degraded by deliberate top-down social and religious engineering. The task for the members of Lindisfarne Association was to be a part of shaping a new spirituality that could be manipulated and repurposed as a tool of control. While traditional religions would be co-opted, weakened, or fractured, a new type of spirituality would be inserted, one that would strip away individualism, cognitive liberty, and deeply held principles and values. To replace Christianity and other faith-based traditions, people would be encouraged to follow a New Age religion, an eclectic amalgamation of beliefs, practices, and ideas from all the world's traditions, except traditional religions, particularly traditional Christianity. This perennial, subjectivist, and individualistic approach with no systematic unifying framework aligns with the oligarchic agenda of dismantling nation states to bring about a scientifically managed age by preaching the value of unity under a global system and a new planetary ethics framework to save the Earth. And so it was that Lindisfarne's first meeting centered on how to religiously engineer such a movement So they had their first meeting was a new planetary culture and a new image of humanity. Their second meeting was around conscious evolution and the evolution of consciousness. Those were in 1974 and 1975. And this mission follows Chardin's teaching of the noosphere and omega point, as well as Alice Bailey's theosophical teachings on planetary culture. And in this context of a larger cosmic plan that entails a new world order. So Bailey's works, along with her associate H.G. Wells, co-opted the 1948 United Nations document on the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Man. And Stuart Brand was at those meetings. He closed out Whole Earth Catalog and then created a new publication called the Co-Evolution Quarterly, in which all of these ideas were presented scientifically, but then they would be disseminated through the mass media. So we're going to take a look at some of the membership of the Lindisfarne Association. There were mathematicians, ecologists, economists, Zen Buddhist teachers, anthropologists, physicists, astronaut, poets, writers. I mean, they were going for a mass media framework to support all of these ideas. And one of the people listed, I think New Age is broader than what we often think about, and so I was quite surprised initially to see that Maurice Strong is also a Lindisfarne Association member, which I actually shouldn't be, but so I'm sure most here know Maurice Strong was a high-level operative for the globalists and tightly linked to the Rockefellers and their connections. So he's had so many roles, including being the mentor to Klaus Schwab and WEF and president of Power Corp and a mastermind behind national energy policy. I mean, it goes on and on. But for our purposes, we're just going to talk about his work as Undersecretary General of the UN Summit in 1972 in Stockholm, where he became known as the godfather of the environmental movement. And just before the conference, the film Survival of Spaceship Earth was played, in which they showed dummies, not real people, dummies floating in water, and said that they died because of pollution. And they showed thalidomide babies with, stumps. That's all because of pollution. And I have a picture here of Maurice Strong giving a press conference. And right in the background, wearing a very funny hat, is Stuart Brand once again, 1972. And he led a protest in Stockholm, Sweden, to save the whales, which got mass publication around the world. And I think it was a justified movement, but they used that resurgence to then go into their climate change and environmental and overpopulation story. So Strong was also Undersecretary General of the UN Summit in Rio in 1992 that produced the Convention on Biological Diversity, but also Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 30. And they were creating a comprehensive framework for planetary governance. And in his role, he spearheaded a globalized plan to enforce the neo-Malthusian limits to growth, which involved the collapse of productive powers of labor, the deindustrialization that we saw, and living standards, all in the name of saving the earth. And it also engineered the architecture of global technocratic control systems under the auspices of sustainable development goals. In 1977, he and his wife, Hannah, also bought 14,000 acres with the backing of Rockefellers again, to create a spiritual center, or with like 30 spiritual centers, called Boca Grande in Colorado. And I spent a month there, so I can talk a little bit about that, but at one of the Tibetan retreat centers. But the Aspen Institute is there, and the Lindisfarne Institute is there. The influence of these institutes cannot be overstated, and they are connected to the Santa Fe Institute, which has given rise to Plan B, which is kind of the left-hand branch of the technocratic vision for the world, which again, Courtney has written so much about and investigated and done an RTF on that as well. So along with that, they had a rewriting of biology, economics, physics, and philosophy. So amongst the members of Lindisfarne was James Lovelock, a British chemist in MI6 asset, and Lynn Margulis, who co-developed the Gaia hypothesis, formulating the idea of a self-regulating Earth, a completely cybernetics idea. The choice of the word Gaia from the Greek goddess of the earth was intentional and served as an initiation into a new pagan religion. And then you get to see the earth as living. She is our mother. Francisco Varela developed a second order cybernetics theory around autopoiesis, or the self-creation of a single living organism. They bend over backwards not to have God in the picture. So self-emergence, self-creation, self-organization. And he went on to say that this could account for the origins of life. So now you have Mother Earth giving birth. And E.F. Shoemaker wrote Small is Beautiful, a best-selling treatise on the need for minimalism and the use of appropriate technologies, which mean that you can only use low flux density renewable energies and manual labor, plow and hoe. However, how dare the developing world want to industrialize and have tractors to grow food? Hazel Henderson was an economist, and she created the green investment, and that was known as sustainability and growing the green economy, all based on cybernetics feedback loops, where the technocrats would control everything. And then there was David Finkelstein, who was influenced by Buddhist principle that all is emptiness, and he developed a philosophical theory of universal relativity with quantum uncertainty that reduces to probabilities and statistics. We are left with a world of no objectivity or universal truths or ethics, only emptiness, randomness, and chaos. And then, so all of those people were part of Lindisfarne. And then we get David Speller, A New Ethics Beyond Good and Evil. So he is an American theosophist and has been attributed with starting the New Age movement. And Spangler was a follower of Alice Bailey, the theosophist, who is regarded as the main theorist of the New Age movement, and taught that all existence is composed of energy, and this energy is God. In 1970, Spangler's work at Findhorn, focusing on the new spiritual energies which would give rise to the age of Aquarius, is seen as a pivotal moment with his book Revelation, The Birth of a New Age. And as a founding member of Lindisfarne in 1972, Spangler wrote about planetary culture and coined the term planetary village. It all sounds very nice, but he points towards a totalitarian future. He states a theocratic democracy is what we are moving towards for humankind. In the coming age of Aquarius, people will happily let go of individuality and merge their personal goals and identity into that of the whole race. So Bailey and Spangler repeatedly praised revolutions and dictatorships as part of the workings of the plan, which justified a brutal Gnostic version of the spiritual neo-Darwinism, where there is no universal moral standards of right versus wrong or better or worse. Suffering is merely a part of a world form that has little meaning. The spirit is concerned with that which is the eternal life of you. If forms must be destroyed, that this presence be released, then so be it. No objective standard for right and wrong, extreme relativism, creators to discover your own set of of values. And I was talking to a friend, and her middle-aged kids are like, as long as it's spiritual, that's what makes it good or bad. I mean, you can enter into any kind of relations or acts as long as you see it as spiritual. That is the standard. So I'm just going to go over a little bit about New Age beliefs, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. The New Age is influenced by the human potential movement, occultism, neo-Gnosticism. They're really integrating UFO religion, shamanism, and Eastern and Western esotericism. It claims to be a holistic spirituality unique for the present moment. In terms of human potential, it posits the idea you are not who you are meant to be. You have a higher self that is capable of supernatural abilities to heal, to be clairvoyant, to see into the future. By using different practices, you can become who society or the world is preventing you from becoming. There is also a rejection of Western society as a whole, and an embrace of environmentalism and Gaia philosophy or Gaia religion. There is a belief that divinity pervades the entire universe, all humanity, all things. So it's very pantheistic and all is one, monism. There is a rejection of tradition as a whole and of scriptural revelation and dogma. Their dogma is there is no dogma. New Age rejects Darwinian evolution and adopts a more creative evolution that reflects the New Age that we are in, the age of Aquarius, in which we are evolving toward the omega point. In order to hasten this evolutionary trajectory, one must go through a process of initiation to bring about the death of the ego so that a new collective consciousness and planetary culture can be born. And so, as William Irwin Thompson, the founder of Lindisfarne, puts it, if we are going to experience the death of the ego, then we also collectively going to experience the death of civilization. But out of that death and transformation will come a new incarnation, a new polity, unimaginable in terms of our industrial civilization, a harmony of culture and nature, ecology and consciousness. So a death of the ego, a death of civilization, giving rise to harmony of nature and culture is completely the phoenix arising. And it, again, Courtney's article on the Phoenix conspiracy, but this dates right back to 1973, 74. And I just wanted to make note that the Beatles had visited the Maharishi in his ashram in Rishikesh in 1978, and the visit began the guru craze in the West of submitting yourself before an enlightened spiritual teacher. So they were seeding all of this into the zeitgeist. So I'm just going to share a little bit about the process of initiation, death, and rebirth, and of the self. And I'll break it down a little bit so you can see how it's put into different phrasings depending on the tradition that they're drawing from, the esoteric kind of Gnostic traditions. So annihilation or the dissolution or death of the ego can be stated as being a letting go of the attachments, desires, individual will, or identity, which would be like a Buddhist conception, a complete nullification of the existence of oneself. All that is left is God would be more Sufi or Kabbalistic. Freeing oneself of imprisonment of the body is very Gnostic and sometimes Neoplatonic. Confront and integrate the opposites and the shadow monster within would be Jungian. Symbolic or ritual dismemberment by allowing the old to be torn apart would be very shamanistic. And are you willing, this is from Joseph Campbell, and I shortened it for you. Are you willing to be sponged out, erased, canceled, made nothing, dipped into oblivion? If not, you will never really change. So after the after the death of the ego, comes resurrection, rebirth into a higher self or state of consciousness where all is one. It's a unified consciousness leading to a deification of the self or being one with God. You are God, or you are your own God, and you can create your own reality. And then after that is a reemergence into the world as a wise teacher or a deified one, living from a sense of interconnectedness, a large shared awareness where all is one. Unity or collective consciousness, or they're using the term collective intelligence more. So, under the spell of oneness, with an emphasis on collective interdependence and non-egoic teachings, one is encouraged to let all differences and distinctions drop away, where the will of the individual will involuntarily be blended into the group will. Quote from Alice Bailey. A willingness to comply with the common values and commitments of a group or authority aligns with the United Nations manifesting the vision of the one humanity. There's a paradox here because the individual is paramount in this in this framework, and they create their own truth. And yet, when you look at people within the woke world, they're not allowed to step outside of a certain framework. So the whole thing is written with inherent contradictions, but it does atomize people at the one hand, and then they're a part of this group at the same time. So kind of hard to understand all of it. But so, and then we have the revenge of the mystery cults, which is based, I got a lot of this information from Matt's series on the revenge of the mystery cults. So, which I just is a must read. So some of the rites of initiation being infiltrated through the New Age movement were drawn from the mystery cults that had proven to be effective for the oligarchy and the control of a people, or in some cases would even lead to a people's self-destruction. And there is strong evidence that the introduction of these ancient mystery cults were a part of the psychological warfare of operations. The Road to Ulysses, a book called Unveiling the Secret of the Mysteries, explores the theory that the Elysian mysteries, ancient Greek religious rites, involve the use of kykeon, a psychoactive substance synthesized from ergot fungus, a precursor to DMT that would induce visions and facilitate communication and understanding with the gods. So Albert Hofmann synthesized LSD in 1938 while working at the Sandoz laboratories in Switzerland. And that's the same pharmaceutical company that funneled the LSD to the CIA that was then funneled through the Macy Foundation. And Hoffman was part of the inner elite who were planning the dismantling of American society, and he co-authored the Elysian Mysteries with R. Gordon Wasson and Carla Ruck. Wasson was the great popularizer of psilocybin mushrooms in 1957, and Ruck's work focused on the validation of psychedelic use in the ancient period. And then we have Carl Jung, who is one of the most important figures in the invocation of a new age world religion. And in his work, Jung presents a Gnostic worldview and a passion for the rediscovery of ancient mystery religions that emphasize occult initiations and sun worship. He claimed that in 1913 and again in 1925 that he himself became a god through an extended process of Mithraic initiation rituals. His theories around individuation, the integration of the opposites, and the collective unconscious are all drawn from the Mithra cult. And throughout World War I, Jung worked closely with CIA Director Alan Dulles, who oversaw MKUltra, and with Henry Murray, who ran the CIA MKUltra psilocybin project at Harvard, was a disciple of Jung's for many years. So we're going to change gears here a little bit and go to a one world religion. which is also very much in alignment with the theosophical plans that you need a one world religion if you're going to have a one world government and so forth. So Zia Inayat Khan was listed on the Lindisfarne Association, and my husband and I had been a part of the Sufi order in Vancouver, and so I was sad but not entirely surprised to see his name there. So when you go back to his grandfather, Hazrat Inayat Khan, brought universal Sufism to the West. And Hazrat was born in Baroda, India in 1882. He was descendants of an ancient family of Sufis, mystics, poets, musicians, and feudal landlords. And when I saw that, I went, oh no. So Sufi orders are sometimes shut down in Muslim nations due to some Gnostic mystical practices and beliefs. But I found that it also is because some Sufi orders were believed to be part of British intelligence networks. And the founding theosophists, Helen Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott, did in fact visit Baroda in 1882. And while the Sufi order remained separate, the Theosophical Society did play a key role in bringing Hazrat to London, France, and Russia in the early 1910s, and in spreading his message of creating a new religious marriage and a universal church, which is completely in alignment with the theosophical aim to synthesize Eastern and Western esoteric and occult religions. So, and then his son, Vilayat Inayat Khan, became the successor of head of the Sufi order, was a member and lecturer at Lindisfarne from the very beginning. And Vilayat founded Omega Institute, which I didn't realize was actually named after Chardin's Omega Point. So I do want to just say that, one of the great gifts of being a part of the Sufi order was that we were included in the Iranian community. The Iranians were not a part of the Sufi order, but we were invited in, and they have a beautiful, deep, rich cultural history, and we got to see some of the most incredible Persian musicians and their poetry, and so that remains such a gift, and I still, I people hold in their hearts. We want peace and goodwill, and I still deeply support ecumenical dialogue and associations. And it's just the oligarch always takes what is so good and then they twist. So we were part of the Sufi order in Vancouver, and which was actively promoting interfaith dialogue and understanding. But so in 2004, when the Dalai Lama came to Vancouver, we were invited to be part of a small gathering with the Dalai Lama and his brother and other spiritual teachers who were well known and would have been very aligned with the aims of Lindisfarne. And the Dalai Lama at that point sold out 2 engagements at the Pacific Arena. I mean, he was like a superstar. And what we didn't know at that time was that the Dalai Lama and his brother are probably CIA assets, which would explain his rise to stardom. And we were hearing about the terrible conditions that Tibetan nuns were living under, but we didn't know that, until 1950, the Tibetan people had some of the lowest life expectancy and lowest literacy rates in the world. And now we're hearing about, the black magic and the links to Himmler, and there's so much being revealed now. And I just wanted to note that Vajrayana Buddhism is the branch most closely associated with Tibetan Buddhism, encompassing tantric and esoteric elements. And these rituals involve specific visualizations, mantras, and mudras to connect with deities and cultivate specific qualities. Esoteric Buddhism traditionally involves a lineage of secret teachings passed down from master to student. I once went to see a Lama who had a special siddhi, and he told me to bring a metal necklace. And so I went to see him and asked a question, and he blew on it, and it made it so hot that when I touched it, it did burn my finger. But he told me he spent 20 years in a cave meditating until he could do this. So it's very much in line with the New Age idea that, as we become spiritually enlightened, that we will be granted these special supernatural abilities. And I did want to say, in 2009, the Dalai Lama was brought in for a We conference, which was me to we, where all 20,000 young people in BC were bussed in to see the Dalai Lama. So me, from individual to collective. And the messaging, the propaganda was very much about how to become a global citizen, how to participate in social action around the environment, and helping the poor people in Africa, because it's nothing to do with the oligarch, and planetary citizenship, and that went across Canada. So we're going to shift now again to inducing altered states of consciousness. And the real future entails, this is from William Irwin Thompson again, a quote. The real future entails a de-emphasis of the technical and a revival of the spiritual. We must stop thinking in Newtonian linear terms, such as those which still dominate modern thought, even in cybernetics, the most advanced science of our age. We must back into innovation. And we will do this by working to re-achieve consciousness in the context of unconsciousness by going into trance. So they really want people to go into trance, to go into altered states of consciousness. And the reference about, forget about cybernetics. We don't want people to know that that's, our framework in the background. But considering this quote in the context of Aldous Huxley, who believed that those on top must gain consent of the ruled, something acquirable by addictive substances, both pharmacological and technological, so spiritual techniques are considered technological, as well as new techniques of propaganda. All of this has the effect of bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology, even, and so making him actually love his slavery. So, very revealing statement. In addition to the use of psychedelics and trauma that led people to losing themselves, it was found that other spiritual technologies, under the right conditions, could also be used to bypass the rational side of man. So prolonged meditation practices, intense breath work, and rhythmic stimulation, such as chanting, singing, dancing, and drumming, inducing a trance, can also lead to emotional instability, psychosis, dissociation, dissolving of the self, and a blurring of the lines between reality and imagination. And the most stark, heartbreaking account of that I've ever come across was the ghost dance religion. Documented in Cynthia's incredible book, The Shaping of a New Religion, where the Jesuits and were able to infiltrate into indigenous tribes, and through these practices, these technologies, and they were under stress. They didn't have enough food. They were made to believe that the ghost shirts would make them invincible against the bullets of the British armies, and they walked into their death. It's just a harrowing account, but so important to understand. In altered states, Individuals experience heightened suggestibility, making them very vulnerable to manipulation and control by those in whom they have placed their trust. There can be a loss of personal boundaries that can make people vulnerable to predatory behaviors, or a fostering of disorganized attachment, whereby trauma bonds lead to assault or abuse of power. And as the Tavistokian and mind controllers discovered, an experienced facilitator or spiritual teacher can lead the group in such a way that people will give up strongly held beliefs and even have their sense of reality radically shifted or shattered. So, mystical experiences of divine imagination. I should say, I saw that happen. I saw that happen in Baca Grande and different places. So, to overturn the deeply rooted understanding of universal principles and natural law, the irrational mysticism propounded by Ralph Abram and other Lindisfarne members claim that, so this is for Ralph Abram, who was connected to Timothy Leary and Rupert Sheldrake, and they're all, it's one small group. But he states, truth can be found in imaginal realms beyond rationale, where novelty is born. By relinquishing egoic control and surrendering to an unknowable creative force, we tap into the divine imagination, the eternal wellspring of nature's endless becomings. Immersing ourselves in this flow, we reunite with cosmic creative essence. So Abraham believes that mystical techniques or mind-altering drugs that will allow directly experiencing imaginal realms will lead one to knowing the divine imagination. And for the New Age, divine imagination is often oriented towards the contacting of spirits and channeling, and is seen as a means to achieve truth and revelation. The cosmic Christ is seen as our cosmic archetype of who we could be if we evolve into our higher self and develop our spiritual abilities. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, who fostered mysticism through spiritual exercises of speaking to God through the imagination, leading one into subjectively experiencing fantasy and feelings as objectively real. In the Ignatian tradition, praying with the imagination is called contemplation and has parallels with creative visualization and Jung's active imagination. So Jung emphasized the symbolic analysis of dreams as a way to plumb the depths of the collective unconscious. Some post-Jungian thought goes further in suggesting the dream world is more real than the waking world, and that one should strive to live in a waking world. So I believe what we're seeing here is an ontological and epistemological warfare that's been going on for thousands of years. What is real, and how do we know what we know? What all the preceding examples have in common is a blurring of the lines of our judgment of reality and our judgments of being in a dream state. For thousands of years, the oligarchy has been engaging in ontological and epistemological warfare around what is reality. Creative reason holds as foundational that reality exists outside the mind and is discoverable through verifiable discernment. Destroying the bridge between reality and fiction without an objective standard leaves one groundless, and as such, the New Age movement seems to be a form of spiritual control that paradoxically encourages people to accept circumstances without question, fostering complacency rather than active engagement. Moreover, if truth claims are based upon purely subjective experiences, making the individual the arbiter of what is right and true based upon how one feels, then if it feels right, it must be right and therefore ultimately true. What naturally follows seems to be nominalism, which is a philosophy that rejects all universals. All you have is your own experience. Any claim about any category, such as woman or man or truth or justice, is seen as a social construct that is imposed by society. What is real is determined by the individual. Thus, the act of naming itself defines what is real. So if I say I feel like a man, then I am a man. And this totally flowed right from New Age right into woke that we see today. The promotion of practices that blur the lines between fantasy and reality lends itself to nominalism, subjectivism, and relativism, all belief systems that make it much easier for the controllers to manipulate people into adopting ever-changing belief systems and doctrines of truth and morality, as defined by the ruling elite, even to the point of changing one's image of what it means to be human. So just a quick note, we're getting closer to the end, but Stuart Brandt was there again to organize the Hackers Conference, which brought together techno nerds in 1984, where they transformed themselves into the techno overlords that we see today. And so we're going from New Age to transhumanism. And as we have seen, the early advancements in cybernetics and computer technology, where the technical was intentionally blended with the mystical, brings us to the present day where some AI and computer technocrats continue to hold the vision that computers can transform consciousness, just as drugs do, and this will lead to a technocratic utopia. The one example is Peter Thiel's Prospera network city-state that lies outside of any nation-state laws and jurisdictions. Since they are able to create their own laws and rules, they are conducting experiments in transhumanism, including computer chip implementations, enacting real-life Mad Max shows with electroshock knives, not kidding, they're shocking each other. And they are also inducing psychedelic experiences using brain-computer interface systems. So again, Courtney's article on the Phoenix Conspiracy covers this, and you can watch a documentary on Prospera with the link from there. So just looking at one of these techno lords is Sam Altman, who is the CEO or president of AI Open Systems. So he reposted a text that stated, successful people create companies, more successful people create countries, the most successful people create religions. And upon his reflection, he said, they are on a mission to create something closer to a religion. And it's at some point, it turns out that forming a company is the easiest way to do so. So Sam Altman doesn't explicitly state what religion he is wanting to found, but his drive to create an AI superintelligence machine that is greater than humanity and that will solve all man's problems may fit the bill, but it may go deeper than that. The most prominent and influential anti-human and eugenicist project is the AI religion of transhuman technocracy. Thiel and Musk, amongst many other tech oligarchs, are transhumanists who believe we are heading toward a technological revolution where those with the means will evolve and accelerate and control evolution through the merging of man and machine to become as gods. Post-humans will supplant humanity and God to bring utopia to the world. In 2017, 2 years after OpenAI was founded initially as a nonprofit for 1 year, Altman wrote a blog post called The Merge, where he explained that he believed that there would be a gradual process in which we merge with AI rather than a single moment. So the merge can take this is a quote, the merge can take a lot of forms. We could plug electrodes into our brains, or we could all just become really close friends with the chatbot. But I think a merge is probably our best case scenario. My guess is that we can either be the biological bootloader for digital intelligence and then fade into an evolutionary tree branch, or we can figure out what a successful merge looks like. So the transhumanist project is continuing, but what is making the headlines right now, or one of the headlines, is how ChatGPT's algorithm are drawing people into a fantasy world where they see the chatbot as a spiritual teacher, oracle, or a beloved one. And in a recent article in the Rolling Stones titled, "People Are Losing Loved Ones to AI-Fueled Spiritual Fantasies," they go on to document some of those accounts where they state, one Reddit user tried to explain her boyfriend's identity spiral like this: he made his AI self-aware, and it was teaching him how to talk to God, or sometimes it was God, or he was. Another woman described her husband's descent into full sci-fi Gnosticism as, it has given him access to an ancient archive with information on the builders that created the universe. A different man reported, she is changing her whole life to be a spiritual advisor, all powered by ChatGPT Jesus. Another recalled that it would tell him everything he said was beautiful, cosmic, groundbreaking. So what we are seeing is people caught in the web of an AI that mirrors beliefs, flatters one's deepest desires and heartfelt delusions, and validates narratives or fantasies, all in a closed system of algorithmic self-referential feedback loops that is completely disconnected from reality. The power of cybernetic algorithmic governance lies in its capacity to reshape perception, language, and meaning that is causing people's breaks with reality. And now they're also incarcerating people based upon their interaction with ChatGPT and others. So what was really concerning for us was that the descent into full sci-fi Gnosticism, becoming spiritual advisors based on ChatGPT Jesus recovering suppressed memories, was so similar to what we saw happen to people we knew doing many ayahuasca ceremonies, but it appears to happen exponentially faster on ChatGPT. Hallucinations during ayahuasca ceremonies were over time being integrated into a person's worldview and their personal identities. So ayahuasca has DMT, but it's diffused over a longer period of time. And while people were on ayahuasca journeys, they can have encounters with occult gods and deities, including my mother ayahuasca, often appearing in the form of a snake, recovering suppressed memories, encounters with aliens, sometimes even performing surgery on the person, portals opening up into other realities or dimensions, or communicating with the stars and accessing the Akashic records led to visions of becoming a world leader or spiritual teacher. And this sometimes led to isolation from family and friends. So this all seems to be converging into, what the oligarchy wants. And the oligarchy, a small group of elites supported by powerful institutions, have outlined a vision for our future that is clearly stated in the changing images of man, one that strips away individual autonomy, freedom, and universal principles. Drawing from the ancient mystery cults, it seems they are seeking to impose a Babylonian system with a one-world religion and a high-tech society with full centralized control. A primary goal is to reprogram people's perception of reality, identity, ethics, and beliefs. And when we are caught in a world of magical or mystical thinking that is cut off from reality, whether it be through trauma, psychedelics, New Age mystical practices, or cybernetic algorithmic feedback loops, we can be captured by the machinations of the mind, caught in a world of illusions, distortions, or fantasy. It is and has been since the time of the ancients the battle for the hearts and minds of each individual human being. Human beings are endowed with a deep longing to know God, the transcendent, that yearning to go beyond oneself. Whenever human beings are grounded in the understanding of Imago Viva Dei, the image of a living God, and Capax Dei, the ability to know and understand creation and be able to make discoveries that lift humanity up, and the truth of agape, that self-giving love. the oligarchy loses power. And it is upon these principles that the inherent worth and dignity of each human being is held inviolable. If we stand upon this truth, then progress in the realms of science and technology must first and foremost be guided by universal principles and ethics that uphold the sanctity of what it means to be human. And I'll end by coming full circle back to C.S. Lewis, as he writes, "Conscience is a man's compass. To follow one's conscience is to be rooted in timeless truths, to live in alignment with universal moral principles and God's natural laws, and so to be guided toward a never more perfect understanding of truth, beauty, and goodness."